Imagine that tomorrow morning, archaeologists uncover something impossible. Deep inside an undisturbed layer of Cretaceous rock, they find the fossilized rib of a Triceratops. Embedded inside that rib is a stone spearhead, not a strangely shaped rock, not a crack, not a modern object pushed into an old fossil. A carefully sharpened human weapon, still lodged inside the bone of a dinosaur that died more than 66 million years ago. The discovery would not merely change one paragraph in a history book. It would destroy the timeline. Museums would close exhibits overnight. Scientists would rush to the site. Every fossil, every human ancestor, and every geological date would need to be examined again. Because a verified human weapon inside a dinosaur bone would mean that someone had stood close enough to a living Triceratops to throw it. Which would raise a second question. What happened to the person holding the spear? Humans hunting dinosaurs sounds like pure fantasy. And according to the accepted fossil record, it is. Non-bird dinosaurs disappeared roughly 66 million years before the first members of the human genus appeared. But not everyone believes the story is that simple. For decades, people have pointed to strange footprints, mysterious carvings, unusual figurines, and ancient legends as possible evidence that humans once saw living dinosaurs. Some claim that giant reptilian monsters described in old stories were not imaginary dragons. They were surviving dinosaurs. Others argue that certain ancient artists drew animals they should never have known existed. And a few point toward alleged human footprints found near dinosaur tracks as proof that the two walked across the same ground. Most researchers reject these claims. But suppose, just for a moment, that one of them turned out to be real. Suppose a small population of humans somehow existed during the final age of the dinosaurs. Could they survive? Could they hunt? Could they build settlements? Would human intelligence defeat animals weighing several tons? Or would our species disappear before leaving behind anything more than a few broken tools and one extremely confusing fossil? To answer that, we first need to look at why some people believe the impossible may already have happened. One of the most famous claims comes from the Paluxy River in Texas. The river cuts through layers of ancient limestone, containing genuine dinosaur footprints. Some tracks were made by huge plant-eating dinosaurs. Others came from large theropods walking across soft Cretaceous mud. Then people began noticing elongated marks near some of those tracks. To certain observers, the marks looked human. They appeared to have heels. Some seemed to have the outline of a foot. And because they occurred in the same general rock formations as dinosaur tracks, a dramatic conclusion followed. Humans and dinosaurs had walked together. Photographs spread. Books repeated the claim. Exhibitions presented the tracks as evidence that the accepted history of life was wrong. For anyone hoping to prove coexistence, the Paluxy marks seemed perfect. Dinosaurs had left footprints. Humans had left footprints. The tracks were side by side. Case closed. Except the case did not stay closed. Researchers returned to examine the marks more closely. Some were natural erosion features. Some had been altered or carved. Others were genuine dinosaur tracks, but the impressions of the toes were faint or hidden beneath sediment. A dinosaur, placing more of its foot against the ground, could leave a long print that looked vaguely human after millions of years of weathering. When the rock was cleaned and studied, several supposed human tracks revealed the three-toed structure expected from dinosaurs. The footprints did not become evidence that humans lived in the Cretaceous. They became evidence that incomplete shapes can become almost anything once the human brain decides what it wants to see. But the footprints were only the beginning. In Mexico, thousands of clay figurines were reportedly collected near the town of Acámbaro. Some appeared to show familiar animals. Others looked like monsters. A number of them seemed to resemble dinosaurs. There were long-necked creatures, horned creatures, animals with large bodies and heavy tails. Some figurines even appeared to show humans touching, riding, or fighting them. If these objects were truly ancient, they would present a serious mystery. How could people living long before modern paleontology create images resembling animals known only from fossils? Supporters proposed several possibilities. Perhaps dinosaurs survived much later than scientists believed. Perhaps ancient people uncovered fossils and reconstructed the animals with astonishing accuracy. Or perhaps human history extended backward into the age of dinosaurs. The problem was not the appearance of the figurines. The problem was their archaeological context. Credible artifacts are not judged only by how interesting they look. Researchers ask where they were found. Who excavated them? Were the layers documented? Were the objects exposed to modern contamination? Do their surfaces show the wear, mineral deposits, and aging expected from genuine antiquity? Can independent teams reproduce the findings? The Acámbaro collection failed to provide the kind of reliable context needed for such an extraordinary conclusion. Archaeologists who examined the figurines reported signs that they were relatively modern objects rather than ancient representations of living dinosaurs. Their designs also reflected outdated popular images of dinosaurs, familiar from books and films. Instead of overturning paleontology, the collection looked much more like modern folk art entering the ground before being dramatically rediscovered. A similar mystery appeared in Peru. Dark stones became famous for engraved scenes, allegedly showing humans performing advanced medical operations, looking through telescopes, riding, flying machines, and interacting with dinosaurs. Some images showed people hunting large reptiles. Others appeared to depict humans riding them. Supporters called them evidence of a forgotten civilization. Perhaps, they suggested, an advanced ancient culture had known the dinosaurs personally. Or perhaps the civilization existed millions of years earlier than accepted history allowed. Again, the pictures were impressive. Again, the context was weak. The stones did not come from controlled excavations with documented layers. Local makers admitted producing engraved stones for collectors and tourists, using modern illustrations as inspiration. Once an impossible artifact can be created cheaply and sold to someone eager to believe, the supply of impossible artifacts tends to become surprisingly large. But footprints and objects are not the only arguments. There are also dragons. Cultures across the world told stories about enormous reptilian monsters. Some had wings. Some breathed fire. Some lived in caves. Others guarded rivers, treasure, mountains, or the entrances to the underworld. In parts of Asia, dragons were associated with rain, water, power, and imperial authority. In Europe, they often became dangerous beasts, defeated by heroes. In many traditions, they were long-bodied, scaled, horned, or equipped with frightening teeth and claws. To some people, the resemblance seems too strong to ignore. What if dragon legends were memories of living dinosaurs? Perhaps isolated dinosaur populations survived into human history. Perhaps early hunters saw them. Perhaps the stories grew larger with each generation until an ordinary surviving reptile became a fire-breathing monster. It is an exciting idea. But similar myths do not necessarily require the same real animal. Humans everywhere knew snakes. They knew crocodiles, large lizards, predatory birds, big cats, and dangerous animals with horns. Combine the body of a snake, the jaws of a crocodile, the claws of an eagle, the wings of a bat, and the personality of something that has not eaten in several weeks, and you have created a dragon without meeting a dinosaur. Ancient people also encountered fossils. A huge bone emerging from a cliff could easily become the remains of a monster. A fossil skull with unfamiliar openings might inspire stories about giants, dragons, or supernatural beasts. But being inspired by a fossil is not the same as seeing the living animal. The claims continue because the idea is irresistible. Humans and dinosaurs together create an image so dramatic that people want it to be true. Yet the scientific problem remains enormous. Human remains and human tools occur in relatively recent geological layers. Non-bird dinosaur fossils occur in vastly older Mesozoic rocks. We find dinosaur bones, nests, eggs, feathers, skin impressions, and footprints. We find human bones, stone tools, hearths, campsites, cut marks, pigments, ornaments, and shelters. But the two records do not overlap. There is no verified human skeleton inside an undisturbed dinosaur layer. There is no accepted dinosaur bone carrying human butchery marks from the Cretaceous. There is no prehistoric human camp containing freshly killed Triceratops bones. There is no stone spearhead embedded in Tyrannosaurus. If humans had lived widely among dinosaurs, leaving absolutely no reliable trace would be surprisingly difficult. Humans are not quiet archaeological guests. We break things. We burn things. We sharpen rocks. We cut bones. We move objects. We leave waste. We walk through mud and occasionally drop the exact tool we needed 5 minutes later. Even small populations can leave recognizable patterns. So current evidence does not support humans coexisting with non-bird dinosaurs. But now, let us change one rule. Forget the accepted timeline for a moment. Imagine that a population of early humans is transported into the late Cretaceous period. Not modern soldiers with vehicles and powerful weapons. Not scientists with laboratories, medicine, and satellite maps. A group of perhaps several hundred hunter-gatherers. They have stone tools, wooden spears, fire, clothing made from hides and plant fibers, language, social knowledge, and no idea what is moving through the forest ahead of them. Their first problem would not be Tyrannosaurus. It would be confusion. The landscape would look familiar enough to invite dangerous mistakes. There would be rivers, forests, insects, flowers, fish, small animals moving through undergrowth. The air would still contain oxygen. Water would still flow downhill. Fire would still burn. Gravity would continue its long campaign against anyone climbing wet rocks. But nearly every ecological relationship would be unfamiliar. Which plants are edible? Which fruits contain toxins? Which insects carry dangerous parasites? Which animals migrate? Which water sources are safe? What does the sudden silence of the forest mean? A modern person transported there might recognize certain dinosaurs from books. An ancient human would have no word for dinosaur. They would simply see animals. Some would be small and feathered. Some would move in groups. Some would dig, climb, swim, or hide. Others would be larger than any land animal humans had ever encountered. The first sight of a giant long-necked herbivore might not produce terror. It might produce disbelief. A neck rises over the trees. Then another, then several more. The animals move like walking hills. Their feet press deep into the soil. Branches snap beneath their bodies. They are not hunting the humans. They may not even notice them. That does not make them safe. A multi-ton herbivore does not need to be angry to kill you. It only needs to place one foot where you were planning to continue existing. The humans would quickly learn the first rule of dinosaur survival. Large herbivores deserve as much caution as predators. A defensive horned dinosaur could charge. A nesting animal could attack anything approaching its eggs. A herd moving toward water could crush a camp without recognizing that the camp existed. Humans living in this world would need to read the landscape in a completely new way. Tracks would become messages. A wide path of broken vegetation might reveal a migration route. Fresh dung could indicate how recently a herd had passed. Alarm calls from smaller animals might warn that a predator was approaching. The direction of birds could reveal water. The sudden disappearance of noise might mean something large was moving nearby. Our ancestors were already skilled trackers. In the Cretaceous, that skill would become more important than physical strength. The people who survived would not be those who fought the largest dinosaur. They would be those who noticed it first. Their settlements would need careful placement. A camp beside a major river might provide fish and water. It would also attract every thirsty animal in the region. Building directly on a migration route would be like placing a tent in the middle of a highway, except the vehicles have horns, tails, and no interest in traffic regulations. High ground would be safer from floods and offer better visibility. Rocky terrain could restrict the movement of enormous animals. Dense forests might hide humans but also prevent them from seeing predators. Open ground would provide warning while leaving the group exposed. The best camps might appear near cliffs, narrow valleys, islands, or broken terrain where giant dinosaurs could not move easily. Humans would build barriers. Not because a wooden fence could stop Tyrannosaurus. It could not. But barriers could slow smaller animals, direct movement, and provide warning. Dry branches placed around the camp would crack beneath approaching feet. Pits and sharpened stakes might discourage medium-sized predators. Smoke could reduce insects and perhaps make unfamiliar animals cautious. Fires arranged around sleeping areas would create light and a psychological boundary. Would fire frighten dinosaurs? We cannot know. Some animals would avoid it. Others might become curious. A predator that had never evolved beside human-controlled fire might not automatically understand that the glowing orange object meant danger. The first person assigned to test this would deserve a very respectful funeral. Humans would experiment. They would observe which species approached smoke. They would notice which sounds caused animals to retreat. They might strike stones, beat wood, wave burning branches, or shout as a group. A single human is small. 20 humans suddenly becoming loud, tall, bright, and coordinated can appear much more dangerous. Our ancestors used this strategy against large mammals. It might also work against some dinosaurs, but not all of them. A hungry predator does not need to believe humans are harmless. It only needs to decide that one isolated person is worth the risk. Children would be especially vulnerable. So would injured adults. Anyone leaving camp alone would become a convenient experiment in Cretaceous food chains. Groups would travel together. Lookouts would watch the rear. Fire would be carried whenever possible. Spears would remain ready. And humans would probably avoid the largest predators rather than seeking heroic battles. A Tyrannosaurus would not behave like the monster in a movie. It would be an animal making decisions about energy, risk, and opportunity. Hunting is dangerous. Large prey can fight back. Injuries can lead to starvation. A human provides relatively little meat compared with a large dinosaur. A healthy Tyrannosaurus might ignore a coordinated group around fire, but an isolated human would be different. A child would be different. An injured person moving slowly would be different. A carcass near camp could attract scavengers and turn one successful hunt into several nights of terror. Humans would learn to process meat quickly. Waste would need to be burned, buried, moved far away, or placed where scavengers could not follow the scent back to sleeping areas. Food storage would become a major challenge. Large animals could smell supplies. Small feathered dinosaurs, mammals, insects, and reptiles could enter baskets and shelters. A person might survive an encounter with a giant predator only to lose half the winter food supply to something the size of a chicken. Prehistory has always understood that humiliation comes in many sizes. Could humans hunt dinosaurs? Yes, but probably not the famous giants. Humans would begin with familiar opportunities. Eggs would offer concentrated nutrition, although stealing them could be exceptionally dangerous. Small dinosaurs could be trapped. Medium-sized animals might be driven toward cliffs, mud, narrow passages, or hidden hunters. Young, sick, injured, or isolated individuals would be easier targets. Humans might scavenge meat from abandoned carcasses after larger predators had finished. They could use long spears to maintain distance. They might create throwing weapons, traps, nets, and coordinated drives. The animal's biology would matter. Some dinosaurs may have been fast. Others had armor, powerful tails, claws, horns, or thick muscle. A spear that worked against an antelope might fail against an animal with unfamiliar anatomy. Hunters would need to learn where the lungs, major blood vessels, and vulnerable joints were located. They would not learn from diagrams. They would learn by watching animals die. And some of those lessons would be purchased with human lives. Over generations, dinosaur hunting could become specialized knowledge. One group might learn to follow small herd animals. Another could harvest eggs only during a narrow seasonal window. A river community might focus on fish, shellfish, turtles, plants, and smaller prey while avoiding large dinosaurs almost entirely. This would be the most realistic human strategy. Do not fight the dominant animals when the ecosystem offers easier food. Humans did not survive the Ice Age by challenging every mammoth to personal combat. They used flexibility. The same flexibility would matter in the Cretaceous. The greatest human advantage would not be the spear. It would be shared information. One person discovers that a certain brightly colored fruit causes vomiting. The lesson spreads through the group. One hunter learns that a feathered predator circles downwind before attacking. Children are taught to watch the wind. One community discovers that a specific dinosaur migration passes through the valley during the wet season. The settlement moves before the herd arrives. Dinosaurs would inherit instincts shaped across millions of years. Humans would add cultural adaptation capable of changing within one lifetime. That difference could keep us alive. A dinosaur must wait for generations of natural selection to alter its behavior genetically. Humans can watch one disaster and create a new rule before sunset. Do not sleep near that river. Do not touch those eggs. Do not follow the small feathered animals when they suddenly run toward the trees. And under no circumstances, allow Caro to test whether the giant horned animal is friendly. Caro has already contributed enough to science. Language would turn isolated accidents into collective survival. Stories would become maps. Songs might preserve migration schedules. Children could memorize the shapes of dangerous tracks. Marks carved into wood or stone could identify water, nests, predator territories, and safe routes. The dinosaur world would gradually stop being chaos. It would become knowledge. Could humans domesticate dinosaurs? Possibly, but not the giant ones people imagine riding into battle. Domestication requires more than capturing a baby animal. The species must reproduce under human control. It needs a manageable diet. Its social structure must tolerate human direction. It should grow quickly enough to be useful. And it should avoid killing its handlers during an ordinary disagreement. Many dinosaurs would fail this test spectacularly. But small social species might offer possibilities. Humans could begin by protecting nests near settlements. Young animals might become accustomed to people. Certain species could help locate food, produce eggs, provide feathers, or give alarm calls. Over many generations, humans might favor calmer individuals. The result would not be a saddled Tyrannosaurus. It could be something closer to a strange ground bird used for eggs, meat, feathers, or pest control. In other words, humans living with dinosaurs might eventually invent chickens through a much more complicated route. Long-term human bodies might also change. Groups living in dense forests could become more agile and compact. Populations traveling across open landscapes might favor endurance. Disease resistance would become critical. Humans would encounter microbes and parasites from an ecosystem separated from us by tens of millions of years. The most dangerous organism in the Cretaceous might not have teeth. It might be invisible. Some ancient pathogens might be unable to infect humans because their biology was too different. Others could cross into our bodies with devastating results. There would be no medicine for unfamiliar infections, no stored knowledge of poisonous plants, no understanding of which insect bite causes fever. A single contaminated water source could kill more people than a large predator. Food deficiencies could weaken entire groups. Injuries would become infected. Broken bones would reduce mobility. Pregnancy and childbirth would become more dangerous whenever communities had to move quickly. The dramatic dinosaur attack would receive the story. Disease, hunger, and accidents would collect most of the bodies. Still, humans might persist. Our species has survived deserts, Arctic winters, tropical forests, high mountains, droughts, predators, and rapidly changing climates. We are not powerful because the individual human body is exceptional. Compared with many animals, it is almost aggressively average. We survive because we cooperate, remember, plan, invent, teach, and reorganize behavior. A Cretaceous human camp would be physically fragile. Its knowledge could be formidable. Then the sky would change. Suppose these humans lived near the end of the Cretaceous period. For generations, they had survived dinosaurs. They understood the rivers. They knew the migrations. They had learned which animals could be hunted and which should be watched from a respectful distance. Then, one day, a new star appeared. It became brighter. A light crossed the sky. Far away, an asteroid struck the region that would one day become the Yucatan Peninsula. The people might never see the impact itself. They would experience what followed: earthquakes, tsunamis in coastal regions, fires, material falling through the atmosphere, darkened skies, falling temperatures, plants dying, food chains collapsing. The human advantage of flexibility would help. People could eat many foods. They could store supplies. They could use fire. They could shelter in caves or underground spaces. They could move. They could share resources. But intelligence cannot create sunlight. Planning cannot restore dead forests. A stored food supply eventually empties. If ecosystems collapse across the planet, every surviving group becomes trapped inside a shrinking circle of resources. Humans might last longer than many large dinosaurs. Small groups near freshwater, seeds, roots, insects, shellfish, or underground shelters could have a chance. But surviving the initial disaster would only begin the struggle. The years afterward could be worse. We cannot know whether a small human population would make it through. That is part of the hypothetical. Perhaps human flexibility would save us. Perhaps our need for large amounts of food, clean water, long childhood care, and stable communities would destroy us. Perhaps the last person would die in darkness, surrounded by tools made by a species intelligent enough to understand that the world was ending but powerless to stop it. And perhaps, millions of years later, another intelligent species would uncover one of those tools. It would find a sharpened stone beside a dinosaur skeleton. Its scientists would stare at the impossible object and ask the same question we began with. Who made this? That artifact has never been found in our world. The Paluxy marks do not provide reliable human footprints. The Acámbaro figurines do not establish ancient contact with living dinosaurs. The engraved stones of Peru lack trustworthy archaeological origins. Dragon legends can be explained without surviving Tyrannosaurus populations. Current evidence places humans and the non-bird dinosaurs tens of millions of years apart. But the hypothetical reveals something more interesting than a caveman fighting a giant reptile. If humans had lived with dinosaurs, we would not have survived by becoming stronger than them. We would have survived by becoming difficult to predict. We would move camps, change deets, build barriers, control fire, create traps, teach children, map migrations, turn accidents into rules, and turn rules into culture. A Tyrannosaurus would possess more muscle. A horned dinosaur would possess better natural weapons. A giant sauropod would outweigh an entire human settlement. But none of them could gather around a fire and describe what happened yesterday so that tomorrow's hunters did not repeat the same mistake. That was the human weapon, not the spear, the story. Return now to the impossible fossil. Triceratops rib, a stone point embedded inside it. One object capable of rewriting the history of life. Scientists have never verified such a discovery. Perhaps they never will. But somewhere outside your window, a small, feathered animal lands on a branch. It has scaled feet, hollow bones, a body plan inherited from theropod dinosaurs. It turns its head and watches you with one eye. Because one branch of the dinosaurs did survive. Birds are living dinosaurs. Ancient humans never shared the world with Tyrannosaurus, Triceratops, or Stegosaurus. But every human camp, beneath a sky filled with birds, existed beside the last surviving dinosaur lineage. So the fantasy is not completely wrong. Humans did live with dinosaurs. They still do. The dinosaurs simply became smaller, grew wings, and learned to steal food from unattended tables.